will you read? I want to welcome everybody who's joined us. There is a legal notification that has to be in the record. Sarah Richards is going to take care of that for us. Sarah, have at it.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. As a result of the ongoing public health emergency related to COVID-19, Executive Order 202.1, as extended, authorizes public boards to meet remotely and take authorized actions without permitting public in-person access to meetings. The public must have the ability to view or listen to the proceedings, and the meetings must be recorded and transcribed. An audio and video recording of today's meeting will be accessible from DASNY's website within 2 days. Today's proceedings will be transcribed and posted as soon as practicable under the circumstances. For additional information regarding the emergency declaration or the executive order, please refer to the DASNY website. And unless there are any questions at this point, I will now go through the roll call so folks know who's here. First of all, for board members, we have our chair, Al Carney, John Johnson, Beryl Snyder, John Gardner, Wellington Chen, Jerry Romsky, and Janice McKinney. We also have Adrian Swazerski, Tracy Raleigh, and Phyllis Morris joining us. I haven't seen Joan Sullivan.
Sarah, it's Al. Joan called, she sent notes to Ruben and I this morning. She had her first shot yesterday, her first vaccination yesterday. Had no reaction whatsoever, but is having one this morning. So she said she'd either be with us or she wouldn't.
Oh, okay. Well, we certainly wish her well. And the others, in addition to board members that are here with us today for DASNY and staff, are myself, Sarah Richards, Deb Fasser, Tara Miner, Gerard Klauser, Robert Drillings, Beryl Snyder, Brian Idahan, Caroline Griffin, Craig Schreibogel, David Ostrander, Dina Amodio, Diane Folletti, Jeff Arnold, Jeff Gordon, and sorry, my computer is slow scrolling. Kim Ellis, Lisa Bryce, Matt Bergen, Melissa Bennett, Michael Johnson, Paul Koopman, Portia Lee, Ruben McDaniel, our president, Ricardo Salomon, Steve Curro, Steve Kozier, and Kathy Ebert. Have I missed anyone?
Impossible.
We have a big group. So thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll turn it back over to you.
Sarah, you're very kind. Again, welcome to all who've been able to join us. As some of you may have heard me say, Joan Sullivan let Ruben as well know this morning that she is having a reaction to her first vaccination yesterday and is not likely to be with us this morning. She may join, but I don't think so. And as you all know, we always miss Joan, and I have let her know that we will look forward to seeing her at the end of March. We're having 2 meetings this month. I've just been reminded that the reason for that is schedule driven with regard to both the budget and the number of weeks between this meeting and what would have been the April meeting. So currently there's no meeting scheduled for April. We'll see how that works out. Please know, staff, that if you all make the decision that we need to do that at some point in April, this board has demonstrated its willingness and its ability to get that done. So do not hesitate if there is a sense that we need to have an April meeting. We'll simply have an April meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I looked up virtual. I had planned this was going to be my video baptism today at DASNY. I was going to join on camera. I can't seem to get that to work. I don't know why. I'm not supposed to do this, Mr. President. I think the gods are conspiring against me. But I looked up virtual because everybody uses it. It's what we're doing now. The definition that seemed to fit best is not physically existing, but made to appear so. So I'll leave the question to to the philosophers and the philologists of the future to decide whether that means that we haven't had a meeting in a year. All right. Yeah, I thought I'd get a chuckle. John Gardner, where are you when I need you?
He's on mute.
He's in virtual land, Al.
He's on
He's in
mute for
virtual
laughing.
land. He can't
I'm
come
back.
back. He's gone. He's in the black hole.
He's virtual.
John, come back. John, come back.
I'm back, Al. Al.
Yes.
Is this recorded? If this is recorded, I'm going to stop talking.
It is recorded.
Yes, sir.
All right, forget it.
We'll talk afterwards. Looking forward to the president's report today, because Ruben is going to give us a brief update on his thinking with regard to the return to office, to the new normalcy that will occur in offices across the nation in coming weeks and months. And Ruben, I am looking forward to that. And I guess that's the last point I had to make. So we'll get to the agenda. The first item on your agenda is the transcript of 3rd February. Have you all had a chance? I assume everybody's had a chance to take a look at it. If there are no comments, then I will ask for a motion to approve it.
You got it, Al.
Thank you very much, Gerard. Is there a second?
Second it.
Thank you very much. Are there any objections to the approval of the transcript? And does anybody choose to abstain from the vote? Neither being the case, then the transcript is approved, and it is approved unanimously. And the motion is approved. The transcript is adopted unanimously. Mr. Romsky, we move to item 2, the Finance Committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We met, I guess, virtually, or however we met yesterday. First, we adopted the meeting minutes from the Finance Committee meeting on early February. I think it was February 2nd. And then we had a fairly active agenda, and we discussed and reviewed 6 resolutions. First was the school district revenue bond financing program. Second up, we discussed the Interagency Council for Developmental Disabilities, Inc. financing. We then advanced to the Gold Coast Public Library. And we then, it was St. John's University. And on all of those 4, after some discussion on each, we voted unanimously to recommend approval of these financings at today's full board meeting. We also discussed 2 exciting TELP transactions, one at Stony Brook, and the other was up in Syracuse, as I remember. I think that's right, Portia. And we approved those. Well, we did not approve them. We recommend that they be approved at today's board meeting. And unless anyone has any questions or concerns, that concludes my report, Mr. Chair, and I'll turn it back over to you. Thank you.
Mr. Romsky, thank you very much. We'll move on now to item 3 on the agenda. It is a single approval financing, and the microphone now goes over to the president.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Behind tab 3 is the school district's revenue bond financing program. The transaction summary will be presented by Dave Ostrander of DASNY. We also have Melissa Bennett of Barclay Damon and Robert Grillings of Berger Gray as counsel will be presenting. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Ostrander. Dave?
Good morning, everyone. The board is being asked to adopt the necessary documents to authorize multiple series of bonds in an amount not to exceed $750 million to be sold through multiple negotiated offerings on behalf of various New York State school districts. Proceeds from this issuance or from this authorization may be used to refinance the bond anticipation notes or bands of various New York State districts, to finance new money projects on behalf of these districts, or to refund bonds issued by DASNY through the school district's program. Although we do not anticipate a refunding at this point, we did include it in this authorization to the extent the opportunity arises later in the year. As in previous years, staff is requesting authorization to meet current demand from districts for a new money band refinancing pool closing in June. as well as, excuse me, as well as to accommodate additional demand that could occur later in the year. As we discussed with the board in the past, participation in the DASNY pool is largely rate driven. When school districts issue bonds, they can receive building aid reimbursement from the state in one of two ways. The school districts can issue their own general obligation bonds, in which case they receive building aid based on the statewide average. This rate, which was most recently set at 1 7/8, lags behind current interest rates since it's based on prior year data. So it's typically beneficial for districts to issue on their own if they can't finance below that rate. If districts cannot issue below that rate, they have the option to issue through DASNY. In a school district issue through DASNY, they receive building aid based on their actual cost of borrowing. So this is typically beneficial in a rising interest rate environment. So to put it more simply, when rates are declining, districts tend to issue on their own. And when we're in a rising interest rate environment, which we are as of right now, they tend to come to the DASNY pool. Over the last 3 years, we've seen our largest pools ever, ranging between 450 million and 580 million. And at the time these financings occurred, interest rates were rising in relation to the statewide average. We're starting to see a similar dynamic this year. So for the 2021 pool, as of today, we've received interest from about 30 districts totaling approximately 300 million. That's just a preliminary number, and that is subject to change based on where rates go over the next month or so. Otherwise, the structure and security are the same as the previous school district pools. So I guess at this point, unless there's any questions, I will turn it over to Melissa and Robert to discuss the documents.
Thanks, Dave. Good morning, everyone. As noted, before you for consideration is the adoption of the 2021 supplemental resolution pursuant to the amended and restated master resolution in order to provide financing for school districts for school construction projects that are eligible for building aid and approved by the Commissioner of Education. The master resolution provides for the issuance from time to time of multiple series of bonds in an unlimited principal amount. Since 2004, multiple series and supplemental resolutions have been adopted. Each series issued under the master resolution are special obligations of DASNY, payable solely out of the revenues, which consist generally of the payments to be made by the school districts on their bonds issued to DASNY and payments to be made by the state comptroller to DASNY out of state funds otherwise payable to a particular school district if it has not made a payment on its bonds issued to DASNY. Each series of bonds issued under the master resolution is secured separately from all other series. As Dave mentioned, the 2021 supplemental resolution authorizes up to an additional $750 million of bonds as and when needed to satisfy the needs of the participating school districts. And it also authorizes customary documents for a negotiated public offering of bonds. As in the past, while credit enhancement is not required, municipal bond insurance has historically been cost-effective for certain bonds and may be utilized for certain bonds this year. I'll now turn it over to Robert to discuss the financing agreements.
Thank you, Melissa. As with prior series of school district revenue bonds issued to finance or refinance projects for school districts, each of the participating school districts will enter into a financing agreement with DASNY with the approval of the Commissioner of Education. Under those financing agreements, the school districts are obligated to make payments to DASNY in amounts sufficient to cover principal and interest on the applicable series of DASNY bonds when due, regardless of whether or not the school districts receive state building aid. In addition, each school district will issue bonds to DASNY backed by their full faith and credit pledge, which requires the school districts to respectively levy taxes in amounts sufficient to enable the school districts to pay their bonds, securing its obligations under the financing agreement that it has entered into. The school district's obligations to make payments due under the financing agreements and other amounts due to DASNY under the financing agreements will also be supported by the statutory state building aid intercept mechanism of the program. Neither the DASNY bonds nor the school district's obligations under the financing agreement are secured by a lien on any facilities of the school district or any other property, and they may not be accelerated as a remedy upon a default. The projects to be financed or refinanced with the proceeds of the school district revenue bonds will be identified in each financing agreement, and prior to the issuance of the school district revenue bonds, each will have been approved by the voters of the respective school districts and by the Commissioner of Education. We're happy to answer any questions that board members may have.
Thank you very much, Robert. Are there questions for Melissa or for Robert or for David? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please, to approve the transaction?
So moved.
Thank you very much, Wellington. Good to see you. Is there a second?
I'll second it. It's Beryl.
Thank you, Beryl. Does anyone object to the transaction as presented? Hearing no objections, are there any abstentions? Hearing none, then the motion is approved, and the motion is approved, and the transaction is approved as well, and unanimously. Before we depart, Melissa, I'd like very much for you to take a message back to Connie Kale for this board. She has recently, I gather, become the managing partner of your firm, of Barclay Damon. I think the first woman in the firm's history to be so recognized. We have had the pleasure of having Connie present to this board in the past. She's technically outstanding. We wish her all the best. Congratulations and all the best of luck in the new job. If you would take that message back to her, we would be very grateful.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'm very happy to bring that message back. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. President, resolutions to proceed with new financings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Behind tab 4 is the Interagency Council for Developmental Disabilities Agencies, Inc. transaction summary, and Gerard Clauser will be presenting. Gerard?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, DASNY senior staff and guests. The transaction summary and transaction report provided to the members is seeking authorization for a resolution to proceed for the Interagency Council of Developmental Disabilities. This transaction will include tax exempt and or taxable, fixed and or variable rate bonds in one or more series at one or more times through a negotiated sale and or a private placement. The purpose of the transaction is to refinance existing bank loans and reimburse certain institutions for cash expenditures, which are used to renovate or acquire certain properties used to provide services for the developmentally disabled. On a program level, this will be the 15th financing for the Interagency Council. This is a pooled financing with 8 participants and 29 projects. We currently have 24 PPA approvals of the 29. 5 are currently out pending. The term is not to exceed 26 years, and the amount is not to exceed $40 million. Each borrower will have their own loan agreement. The security features include a pledge of all public funds attributable to each finance project, a standby intercept of these public funds attributable to each project, a debt service reserve fund of 6 months, and mortgages on real property acceptable to DASNY where available. I mentioned that we have, there are 29 projects, and currently we have 24 PPA approvals. Just as a reminder, I'll give you a brief highlight on the significance of the PPAs. So to initiate the development of a project to serve individuals with developmental disabilities, this is required. The not-for-profit provider is required to complete a CON, a certificate of need, which is reviewed by OPWDD for compliance and need. Ultimately, the projects are supported through the contract and reimbursement arrangements with OPWDD, and the state commits to support the development and operation of the project if it is completed and in conformance with the PPA. Project funding is subject to annual appropriation of sufficient monies by the state legislature, and the prior property approvals are in place for 24 of the 29 proposed projects. In Table 2, there is an other column, and a significant number it currently resides there, and that is a result of the 5 pending PPAs. My expectation is that will go down, unlikely to 0, but to a a rather immaterial or insignificant number that represents the difference, which will ultimately represent any slight overages from the PPA approval. The projects are expected to have a replacement operator component. We anticipate a AA3 rating from Moody's. The state's programs and policies demonstrate the essentiality of community-based services to the developmentally disabled population in the state of New York. And the 8 borrowers in this pool have had experience in providing these needed services to this population. Accordingly, the staff report recommends the board adopt a resolution to proceed for one or more series of bonds with maturities not to exceed 26 years and an aggregate amount not to exceed $40 million. Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Clauser, thank you very much. Are there questions for Gerard? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please, to approve the transaction?
Moved. Tracy?
I'm sorry, I don't know who that was.
This is Tracy, Al.
Oh, hi, Tracy. Thank you. Is there a second?
Second it.
Wellington, thank you very much. Are there any objections to the approval of the transaction as presented? Hearing none, are there any abstentions? Hearing none, then the motion passes unanimously and the transaction is approved. Thank you, Gerard.
Thank you very much, Chairman.
We move on to tab 5. Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Behind tab 5 is the Gold Coast Library transaction summary, and Steve Kozier will be presenting this for us. Steve?
Thank you. Good morning, all. The board is being asked. Good morning. The board is being asked to adopt a resolution to proceed for 31-year tax-exempt and/or taxable fixed and/or variable rate bonds in an amount not to exceed $10.8 million for Gold Coast Public Library. Gold Coast Public Library is a new DASNY client and was added to the DASNY statute in 2015. The library is a special district library, which was founded in 2001 and is located in Glen Head in Nassau County. The library district is coterminous with the North Shore Central School District, less the village of Seacliff. Bond proceeds will be used to acquire an approximately 2.62 acre parcel of land at 180 Glen Head Road in Glen Head, and to construct a new library building on this site. Authorizations to pledge funds raised by taxes for amounts required under the DASNY loan agreement was approved by a voter referendum held on December 8th, 2020. The vast majority of funding for the library comes from real property tax revenues levied by and collected by the towns of North Hempstead and Oyster Bay. Taxes collected by the towns are paid as received to the library in 2 installments in February and August. Any changes to the tax levy are submitted to the voters for approval. And once approved by the voters, the library's tax levy is considered an annual appropriation. If the library subsequently requests an increase and the voters defeat that request, then the appropriation reverts to the amount last approved by the voters. The bonds are expected to be rated AA3 or better by Moody's. Security will include a pledge of revenues and a lockbox. The lockbox requires the library to fund in advance a debt service account as tax collections are received. The towns will send all tax receipts directly to the trustee. A portion of the library's tax receipts will be set aside by the trustee to fund the debt service fund, and the remaining balance will be transferred to the library to be used for its operations. In summary, the library has a predictable revenue stream, and the debt service fund will be funded through the lockbox mechanism ahead of bondholder payments. Therefore, staff requests approval of a resolution to proceed for a bond issue in an amount not to exceed $10.8 million on behalf of Gold Coast Public Library. And Mr. Chairman, before I turn the meeting back over to you, I just wanted to respond to a question you raised at Finance Committee yesterday afternoon when you asked what makes up the other revenues on table 1 of the transaction report.
Yes, thank you.
And I responded, I believe they were items such as grants and other fundraising, and likely a small amount for fines or late fees. And I looked more closely at the audits and confirmed that this is largely the case. And just looking at the 2019 audit, the library reported a little over $65,000 in other revenues. Of that, interest income accounted for $25,000, and grants and donations came in just below $20,000. And then fines and loss and damaged material reimbursement totaled $9,000. And fees for various programs run by the library was nearly $6,000, and copier and printer fees was $3,000, and book sales and other revenues totaled approximately $2,000. So,
Steve, thank you for your very thorough response.
you're welcome. And just looking again at table 1, you'll notice that the other revenues were higher in 2015 and 2016.
Yes, sir.
Totaling about 130,000 or 140,000. And those other revenues were higher in those 2 years because, in addition to the typical other sources of revenues I listed, the library also received insurance proceeds when frozen pipes in the building caused sprinklers to go off, which caused a significant amount of damage, including the loss of a large number of books. And between those 2 years, the library received over 120,000 from its insurer to cover damages. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you.
Can't thank you enough. It was extremely thorough. I appreciate it. Are there questions for Steve? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please, to approve the transaction?
So moved.
Thank you, Wellington. Second, please.
I'll second. This is Beryl.
Beryl, thank you so much. Are there any objections to the transaction as proposed and presented? Hearing none, are there any abstentions from the vote? Hearing none, then the motion is approved unanimously and the transaction as well. Thank you very much, Stephen.
Thank you.
I think we can move directly on to the next presenter, who indeed is Stephen Gozer.
Yes,
Yes, sir. Behind tab 6, we have St. John's University transaction. Steve?
Thank you. Here, the board is being asked to adopt a resolution to proceed for one or more series of fixed and/or variable rate tax exempt and taxable bonds with an aggregate par amount not to exceed $365 million on behalf of St. John's University. St. John's has been a DASNY client for more than 50 years and has always met its obligations to DASNY on time and in full. The board will recall at the May 2020 DASNY board meeting, the board adopted documents on behalf of St. John's University for a $325 million issuance. St. John's was responding proactively to the impact of COVID-19 pandemic, and the approved financing was structured to mitigate risk with respect to its debt profile. The DASNY approval included up to $30 million of new money projects, and the balance was for refundings of certain outstanding DASNY bonds. The financing was placed on hold in June of 2020 as the university wanted to further assess and respond to the disruptions caused by the COVID-19 pandemic and to ensure that their plan of finance supported the university going forward. With the approval of the proposed financing, the university would no longer utilize the approvals obtained in May of 2020. The proposed financing is similar to the financing approved by the DASNY board in May 2020, with the addition of a new money project requiring additional authorization. At the same time the university was working on the anticipated 2020 financing, it was in the planning stages for developing a new health sciences building with a planned borrowing in 2021. The university's board has approved the financing of up to $90 million in new money projects, including the new health sciences building. The health sciences project is expected to cost approximately $78 million, leaving a balance of approximately $12 million to be used for other capital projects, including deferred maintenance. These other projects may include items such as HVAC, elevator, and other infrastructure projects, renovations to existing facilities, the purchase and installation of fire safety equipment and technology upgrades. And the new health sciences building will be constructed on the site of what is now St. Vincent's Hall, which will be demolished. The health sciences building will add support to the university's health science initiative and strategic enrollment planning, which will inject new infrastructure and programmatic space capabilities to grow the St. John's College of Pharmacy and Health Sciences and interdisciplinary programs. The university is adding the new health sciences programs, which build upon the pre-existing St. John's expertise in key areas of the health sciences and directly relate to local, regional, and national healthcare industry needs that have only been elevated during the COVID-19 crisis. In addition to the new money issuance, the university also plans to refund all or portion of certain DASNY bonds it has outstanding. The refunding candidates are the same candidates that were approved in May of 2020. So St. John's plans to refund and fix out its variable rate Series 2008 B1 and Series 2008 B2 bonds. The Series 2008 B1 bonds also have a swap which it plans to unwind. Refunding the variable rate bonds with fixed rate bonds will provide a more conservative overall debt mix in a relatively low interest rate environment and eliminate interest rate, downgrade, and renewal risk. Additional refunding candidates include the Series 2012B, Series 2013A, and Series 2015A bonds, which each have 10-year call provisions and aren't eligible for current refundings under current tax law. Therefore, these refundings will be done either taxably or through a forward delivery. The overall financing is expected to be a combination of tax-exempt and taxable bonds. Bonds are expected to be issued in a negotiated sale. However, the university has requested the flexibility of being able to do a private placement as well. The university may choose to fund approximately 2 years of capitalized interest on the new money issuance. Subject to useful life analysis by tax counsel, there may be extensions of certain final maturities and/or some restructuring of debt principal of the refunded bonds to achieve a more level overall debt portfolio and to provide greater affordability within the existing debt service budget for the new projects requiring capital investment. If all of the refunding candidates are included, the net present value benefit is anticipated to be approximately $15 million or 6% of the bonds being refunded. The total estimated par of the proposed financing is approximately $350 million, and staff is requesting a par not to exceed $365 million to ensure there are sufficient funds to complete the refundings and the authorized new money expenditures. Upon completion of the proposed financing, maximum annual debt service is estimated to increase moderately from approximately $39.8 million to approximately $40.7 million. The university is currently rated A3 by Moody's and A- by S&P, and the bonds are expected to be a general obligation of the university with no additional security. I'll now present some additional information regarding the operations and audited financial statements of the university. The university is dependent on student-related charges, with 74% of 2020 revenues coming from net tuition and fees. The university averaged full-time equivalent, or FTE, enrollment of 17,527 students over the 4-year period from fall 2016 through fall 2019. These were the 4 highest totals in the history of the university. Fall 2020 FTE enrollment declined to 16,040 students, primarily due to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. The university implemented several recruitment strategies over the past year, and enrollment planning continues in an effort to mitigate the impact of COVID-19 and improve enrollment while maintaining its admission standards. These strategies, which are outlined in the staff report, will benefit from the new health sciences building, as many of the new degree programs will be enhanced by this capital project. The already approved new academic programs are projected to grow enrollment by 480 students per year, and additional programs are in the planning stages. St. John's has a consistent history of positive operating margins, including a $13.2 million surplus in 2020, despite disruptions caused by COVID-19. Operating surpluses over the last 5 years averaged $23 million. Despite the impact from COVID-19, the university continues to target a balanced budget for 2021, even under stress assumptions. The university's net asset base increased from $725 million in 2016 to $936 million in 2020, primarily from an increase in investments and a decrease in long-term debt over the past 5 years. Investments were up about $100 million to approximately $750 million, and debt decreased by about $120 million over this time period. The university's current outstanding debt of approximately $397.7 million is a 15-year low. St. John's has been strategic in funding capital projects over the past 15 years from planned reserves or gifts without the use of debt. The university's 2020 debt service coverage ratio was 2.0 times compared to the 2019 DASNY median of 1.9. So in summary, the university has requested DASNY to approve a bond issue to refund the refunding candidates I described earlier, and the ability to issue up to $90 million in new money projects, including a new health sciences building, which is expected to enhance the university's position in the health sciences related industries and projected to propel enrollment. Staff is requesting the board to adopt a resolution to proceed with a financing on behalf of St. John's University an amount not to exceed $365 million to facilitate the university with its plan of finance. Mr. Chairman.
Steve, thank you very much. Are there questions or comments for Steve? I might say that the Finance Committee had a very robust discussion yesterday with Steve about, and a very positively robust discussion yesterday about this proposed transaction. The Finance Committee Chair has already pointed out that it has been recommended for approval by the board. So again, are there any questions or comments for Steve? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please, to approve the transaction?
Sure.
I'll second. This is Beryl Snyder. And I also wanted to say that I think it's going to be a very, very positive addition to the healthcare system in Queens. My husband was raised a stone throw from St. John's, and it's an area really in need of that kind of improvement. So I'll second the motion.
Beryl, thank you very, very much. May I have, I'm sorry, I've just done that. Forgive me. The motion's been properly moved and seconded. Are there any objections? Hearing no objections, are there any abstentions? Hearing none, then the motion is approved as presented and the transaction is approved.
Thank you.
We now go to the tax exempt leasing resolutions, Mr. President.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Behind tab 7 is the State University of New York Stony Brook University Hospital transaction. The summary update will be presented by Portia Lee. Portia.
Thank you very much. Before the members for your consideration is the TELP transaction on behalf of SUNY Stony Brook University Hospital in an amount not to exceed $48 million. As you know, it's the policy of the Public Authorities Control Board that TELP transactions that exceed $10 million in a 12-month period be brought before the DASNY board and PACB for approval. There's an attached equipment list, which includes various equipment, including IT, pharmacy, and other types of equipment. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you very much, Portia. Are there any questions for Portia about this proposed TELP transaction? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please, to approve it?
So moved.
Thank you very much, Wellington. Second, please. Is there a second?
I'll second it, Beryl.
Beryl, thank you very much. Are there any objections to the transaction? Are there any abstentions from the vote? Hearing none, then the motion is approved, as is the transaction unanimously. Portia.
And the second TELP transaction before the members for consideration is SUNY University Hospital at Syracuse in an amount not to exceed $42.5 million. As noted previously, policy of the Public Authorities Control Board is that financing TELP transactions which exceed $10 million in a 12-month period be brought before the DASNY board and PACB for approval. There's an attached equipment list, which includes various emergency department, radiology, IT, and other equipment. Mr. Chairman.
Portia, thank you very much. Are there questions for Portia? Hearing none, may I get a motion, please, to approve the transaction as presented?
So moved.
Thank you, Wellington. Is there a second?
This is Tracy.
I'll second.
Tracy, thank you very, very much. Are there any objections to the transaction as presented? Hearing none, are there any abstentions from the vote?
Yeah, this is John Johnson. I abstain. I sit on the Upstate Medical Council.
John, thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. And the record will reflect we do have one abstention on this vote. The motion is approved, and as is the transaction. Thank you all very much. The next item on the agenda is the Corporate Governance Committee report. Chairman Johnson, since you're already on the screen, why don't you pick up the virtual microphone and run with it?
Well, all right. I think we can probably do that. The Governance Committee met yesterday on the Zoom call. I guess we're no longer allowed to use the word virtual. That's okay. We're in an era, we live in an era of censorship now, so I'm not sure whether this is fake news or real news, but anyhow, we met yesterday and that's true. And we adopted the minutes of the meeting, of our October meeting. Then we went to work, and we're going to ask Sarah on the some of the annual actions that we recommended continue, and I'm going to turn it over to Sarah to take us through what has to be done here at this meeting. Okay.
Thanks, John.
Sure, thank you. At yesterday's meeting of the Corporate Governance Committee, as required by the Public Authorities Law and the DASNY bylaws, the Governance Committee undertook the required review of the Code of Ethical Conduct, as well as the policy regarding time and attendance and compensation to staff officers, and that review was required by the committee. No board action is required. The other item that was considered and discussed were some proposed changes to the whistleblower policy. And I believe, Mr. Chair, that President McDaniel was going to walk through a review of that.
That's fine. Thank you very much, Sarah. Mr. President.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. Yes, if you recall, several months ago, our internal audit and our audit committee proposed that we have a centralized third party for our whistleblower complaints, whether those were internal or external. And so we went about the work of getting a firm externally to have our whistleblower calls come to them. They will then receive those calls, determine where they should go, and then take appropriate action. So whoever calls those lines will be calling a third party. That third party will determine whether that's an external issue that we need to work through our OPI group, a discrimination issue, or some other issue, so they can appropriately have that barrier so those DASNY employees making those decisions. And so we have that set up. And so we needed to change our whistleblower policy to accommodate that change. Ricardo Solomon, Sarah Richards, and Tara Miner spent good time on this policy, and we appreciate that work. We've made changes for two things. One, to take care of the whistleblower. The second is we also started about a year ago the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. I'll talk more about that later. We wanted to make sure that if someone had a whistleblower complaint that hit one of those topics, that office was in the right order to be notified of that complaint and assist with the resolution. And so those two changes were made specifically, a couple cleanups, and I feel very good about where we are with whistleblower policy now and present it to the board for approval.
Mr. President, thank you. Let me commend the staff on coupling the new Office of Diversity and Inclusion with the pre-existing senior folk who are responsible for receiving and reviewing, depending on category, the whistleblower complaints that we received. It's a great inclusion, and I think it works well. Are there questions for, I'm sorry, there is a resolution that we are required to pass. That resolution,
yes,
or to review. That resolution appears directly behind the revised whistleblower policy. Are there any questions about the policy itself or the resolution itself? Hearing none, may I have a motion, please, to approve it?
So moved.
Thank you very much, Wellington. Is there a second? May we have a second?
I'll second it, Beryl.
Second, I was trying to get off. I was going to second it, but that's okay.
Well, John,
I was
thank you.
mute.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It does happen. The motion has been properly moved and seconded. Are there any objections to it? Hearing none. Is anybody on the board abstaining from the vote? There being no abstentions, then the motion is approved. Policy is adopted. Chairman Johnson, thank you very much for your work on this.
And I think that gets us to where any action required by the board is the committee did spend some time on the annual board self-evaluation. First of all, thank you very much for we had a good we had a complete response to the questionnaire, and and a timely, so we didn't have a lot of issues. So we were able to get it. And we did spend some time yesterday evaluating. I think we're going to go into executive session in a minute, but before we go into executive session, just would like to put on the record on behalf of the Governance Committee that we felt that the results, overall, the results of the self-evaluation showed an improvement over the last several years, which is all positive news given the challenges that we've all faced in the last 12 months, and especially that the authority has faced. So it was all positive. I think it was a positive performance, and I think that that's a tribute to the management in place, that they're doing an excellent job in keeping the board understanding, keeping the board fully aware and understanding what's going on in the authority. So with that, I think we need to go into. When are we supposed to go? Yeah, when are we supposed to go to the self? We're going to do that at the end of the meeting, correct?
That's right. If with your approval,
yeah,
we'll move on with the meeting and then have the governance session at or toward the end of the meeting, so that the folk who have to go back to work can go earn the money that they get paid.
All right, I agree with that completely.
And Chairman Johnson, if I could, I just want to let you know that Brian Cisneski, who used to be a board member of DASNY, he now is a new position. He reached out to me a couple of weeks ago and asked for our form of board self-evaluation. He was so impressed with it, he wanted to instill that in his organization. So the good work of DASNY is now spreading out through the state.
Is he paying us for it, Mr. President?
One way or another, he will.
Thank you very much. Mr. Johnson, thank you for your report, and we will look forward to the discussion at the end of this meeting. Mr. President, we're at tab 10.
Great, thank you very much. And I'm going to try to be very deliberate in my president's report. We've got quite a few things to go through. We also have several people who will be coming in and out to present various components to make it hopefully more interesting, if nothing else. But the first, I want to address Chairman of the Governance Committee, John Johnson's request. As part of the Governance Committee, he wanted to make sure that we reviewed with the board what we have been doing over the past, I guess it's almost 12 months now, as it relates to working remotely, working through the pandemic situation and the difficulties that that's provided logistically, how we've engaged staff, and what we've done as far as new hires and bringing them into DASNY and making sure we maintain the DASNY way, if you will. First, we have not hired anyone during this pandemic period of time. So we've not had the difficulty of having someone start during the pandemic. We did hire a couple of people, or had a couple of people join us right before we went remote. So they had an opportunity to be in the office for a few days, but those people have been engaged well. So fortunately, we have not had to work hard on new hires. However, we have been very strategic and very thoughtful, I believe, in how we engage our employees to maintain our staff productivity. The first thing we did in going remote was we had each employee revise their work plan so that from a work plan perspective, working remotely, everyone was clear on what their responsibilities were and how they would be measured, and also their managers and the managers above them could make sure that everything that needed to be done was being completed, and whoever was supposed to be responsible for that, we knew who that was. So those were introduced, and then the staff was directed on how to complete their timesheets. You know, one of the benefits to DASNY is all of our work is done timesheet wise and billed to a specific code. And so we did give some codes for out of office for folks who, for whatever reason, were not able to be productive at a given time. But we wanted to make sure we accurately reflect what we're doing on behalf of our clients. And so I want to commend Jeff Arnold, who did a lot of good work on reviewing these timesheets throughout this period of time, so that if he felt like people were inadvertently mismarking things, that we were making sure we're aware of that. We also communicated very directly with staff members on the various codes that were enhanced during this period of time. So we did a nice job, I think, of making sure that the timesheets are consistent and we can accurately both bill our clients for the time for clients, but also as management, look at our productivity measures and make sure that we feel good about where we are productivity-wise. And to the extent that we saw individuals who, because of their skill set, ability, or job responsibility, were not being as effective as they would have been in the office, we were doing one-on-one reach out to them to do whatever we could to enhance their productivity, whether that was additional assignments, additional equipment. And in many cases during the pandemic, we had people volunteer. The state had several outreaches to us for coordination on vaccines, most recently, but also coordinations on testing. And we had a lot of staff members throughout the period of time volunteer during the COVID crisis when they were not busy doing DASNY work. So that was excellent to see. On the engagement side, in this virtual world, it is more difficult to engage staff. One of the things we really missed was just the informal communications where someone might get some mentoring or some problem solving, in a more casual setting. And so we really tried to do a lot of things to make sure that we were all communicating well and communicating effectively. One thing we did was we implemented the Teams platform on Microsoft, which is a video chat call format. We required everyone who is in the office on clocking that they would be connected to Teams so that we could call, chat, or email as needed. We have all of our meetings, internal meetings, on Teams with video cameras on so we can see each other and get the body language as well as the verbal and make sure that people are engaged. And that has really been very helpful, I believe, for making us all feel like we are still connected. I have hosted once a month what we're calling a lunch with the president, where we have different folks. Grants did one. We'll give a 10 to 15 minute presentation on a unit or a project. And then we would have Q&A with everyone being able to ask questions of me about the specific project area and or other things going on. The real goal here was to share that work was going on at DASNY and let people know what that work was and to highlight the people that were engaged in that work. I also have been sending out a weekly Friday video that updates what's going on at DASNY during the week. And most weeks I have an interview with someone at DASNY. For instance, when the Moynihan Station permitting was done, the two folks who led that on the ground for us, I interviewed those guys from Moynihan Station. Very engaging. We also had an external architect who's been working with DASNY for some 30 years. He came on and talked to us about the work going on at some of the SUNY campuses. And I think those have been well received. We typically get somewhere around 200 to 250 people viewing the videos and 250 to 300 people in the lunches. And so that has been good. We've also been encouraging staff members to communicate with each other and making sure that for people that you would have normally walked past in the hall or in the break room that you're not seeing now, we've encouraged folks to really get out and talk to those folks and do that. Some statistics. Jeff Arnold provided me with these. We're projected to close 15 private client financings in 20 to 21 compared to 19 and 20. We're projected to disperse about $600 million in construction payments in 2021 compared to $773 million in construction payments in 19 and 20. And in 2021, 42% of all hours charged were direct bill to projects compared to 46% in 1920. So you can see that we're down a little bit as we would expect, but certainly not significant in a way that would cause significant concern. We also have been working hard on outreaching to our partners. Just to give you some numbers and some indications of that, in Kim Ellis's group for the 3-month period ending 12/31/20, we had a great number of performance from both our MWB and SDVOB broker dealers as we bid out various securities. Of those trades during that quarter period of time, 44% were awarded to either an MWBE or SDVOB firm. These are all competitively bid. And I just want to make a side note. One of the reasons it's so good to have smaller firms, minority firms, and SDVOB firms involved in our accounts is during these periods of time, they pay attention to some of the smaller transactions that we do on a day-to-day basis and give us aggressive bids. And so it's always good to see that work. A couple of weeks ago, we had a job order contracting information session that was opened up to all folks who were interested in responding to an RFP on job order contracting. That information session was very successful. We had over 200 people attend. Michael Clay and Wayne Benjamin led that for us, and that was very, very well received. Our communications department has been spending a lot of time making sure that we get information on our intranet that has been reimagined as a place for people to easily get information and access about what we're doing at DASNY. And that has been, I believe, well received by folks, and appreciate that staff. And then also one thing that's been going on behind the scenes that I think will be very productive for DASNY in the long run is our IS department has been looking at all of the various things we did electronically that we historically done paper-based, and is now trying to develop systems internally for us to take some of the lessons learned and create a more streamlined process. Some examples of that, on the banking vendor portal information, we're now looking to have people who want to get paid electronically. We're putting together a vendor portal for them where they can just come in one time, enter all their information so they get their payments done electronically. We're looking at the e-signature and making sure that all works. And so we're doing some work there. We also have a couple of specific projects that are big projects going on. PM Web is one, which is our project management, the construction side. We've had a couple of internal folks who've really taken great responsibility for that and have done a great job. I got a demonstration on that the other day. That is looking very, very good. We also are doing some work on the grant side, and that has been going very well. We're doing some work on the public finance side. So the IT group has really integrated a lot of the lessons learned here, and has been going very, very well. That brings us to how we're going to come back to work in a more traditional way. And a lot of people around the city, both state agencies as well as private sector, are going through this now. Clearly the numbers are getting better, not 100% where we want to be yet, and we'll continue to monitor those. But I have started to let everyone know that they need to begin talking to their staff members about coming back to work over the next couple of months and begin planning for that personally. Our target is to have more people in the office in April than we've had in the past, and we want to do that in a systematic way. It's also our target in April to have people in the New York City office come in and, at the very minimum, get their desks set up. So we'll be providing kind of on a weekly basis the ability for a subset of staff to come in. And our hope is that over the month of April, we can begin to have much more flow in and out of the office and testing the safety systems, make sure we have the protocols in place so that as we get into the summertime, assuming that numbers continue to go well, that we will have the engagement people on board. We're also working with a target of the May 5th board meeting to have some of you in person. So we're making sure we set up the New York City office so that we can safely have some of you come to the office. We still have a component, obviously, of virtual people piping in as well. But that would be a great day if that, in fact, comes to fruition. But we certainly will not put any of you at risk. So very good targeting. I think we're in good shape on coming back when it's time. Again, we've done a good job on the PPE and all the other things. So I think we're in good shape there. So, in summary, I've answered your question a long way, Chairman Johnson, but I think that I am pleased to report that although the 12 months have not been a great 12 months for DASNY for various reasons, we have been very productive. We monitor that productivity. We've assisted members of the organization who have struggled with whatever productivity tools they need. We've done a lot of work on employee engagement. I have personally spent a lot of time in various monthly meetings talking to staff members. The grants group, I did a couple of communication seminars for them. The IS group, I've been engaged with them on some of their development, really just trying to be present. I've done some one-on-one pop-ins on people just to say hello, and I think all that has been well. So we're working very hard on that. With that, I'll pause there, Mr. Johnson, to see if I've answered your question, and Mr. Chairman, see if there are any questions from the rest of the board.
Ruben, thank you very much. I think that this is an interesting time to have to govern an agency that has had such a transformation. And at this point, as you look back, as we all look back, I hope we can say that we know what we did and we've learned a lot from it. And hopefully we never have to put it in practice again. But I think that this has been an excellent summary of what has been accomplished, of which I'm sure there was a lot more than you covered. And I think it's just a terrific performance on the part of the management, and that puts us in good stead for tomorrow. So thank you very much for your work.
Mr. President, it's Al Carn. First of all, let me echo Chairman Johnson's remark there. Your report far more than answered the questions that he raised. Thank you very much for taking the time and making the effort to give us a play-by-play of the myriad matters that you've had to address over the last year. And it's great to hear that you've had the kinds of successes that you've had. Thank you very much for that. Are there questions for Ruben before we move on into the remainder of his and other presentations? Hearing none. Mr. President, how do you want to proceed?
Great, thank you. My next item I want to talk about is our Office of Diversity and Inclusion. As you recall, in spring of 2020, we established that office. Michael L. Johnson was appointed as the director of our Diversity and Inclusion Office. He has done some great work over this year, first organizing from scratch the office, working with our state partners and others on best practices. We've done a lot of work on creating metrics and measures around diversity and inclusion, communicating to staff and the organization how important it is to us, giving people a place where if they feel like there's something, whether it is negative or positive around the world of diversity and inclusion, a place to have those conversations. I think that has been well received. We also did a seminar on unconscious bias. All employees have taken that. I participated as well. It was very well done. That was wonderful. We also did the initiative, the statewide diversity strategic planning initiative. We participated in that, providing responses to where we are, what we're trying to accomplish. And I feel very good about where we are, but it really is just the beginning. Sometime this afternoon, Deb Fass will send you an email with a link to an interview that I did with Michael Johnson. He and I talked about what's going on in diversity and inclusion. I really hope that you all will take the time to view that. And at this time, I'd just like to ask Michael Johnson just to say one or two brief words on diversity and inclusion at DASNY and what he sees going forward in that office. Michael?
Hi, everyone. I'm sure you guys have seen me in one of the squares at some point. The Office of Diversity and Inclusion for DASNY, I can't thank Ruben enough for introducing it. It's something that is needed, and it's given the employees at DASNY a sense that there's actually something there that addresses so many different issues that they have that maybe they haven't been able to share before. So, and going forward, especially in working with the statewide Office of Diversity and Inclusion Management, where by us being involved with them, we gain access to statewide and national best practices, and through performance measures, education, and training. That can only serve to make DASNY the place that Ruben is trying to make it, which is the best place in the state to be.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Again, thank you for your good work. You've done a great job getting it set up. I know we've got a lot of work to do, but we're off to a great start. And again, I commend to each of you board members to view the video interview with Michael and I. It's about 10 minutes long, so it's not too long, but I think we'll give you some more detail into what we're doing in that department. Any questions on the Office of Diversity and Inclusion?
Yes, sir. It's Al again. Michael, if you, this is something to be done offline, and not because there are any secrets. I'm just curious, and I don't want to take the board's time today, but I would love to hear your views of what DASNY's Office of D&I what will be the interplay, the interaction between our office and the state's management of diversity and inclusion, just to get a better sense of what you're thinking about how that might work, ought to work, will work. But we can do that at some other time, whenever you've got.
Sure, absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you.
I will say, Mr. Chairman, Michael has been engaged with that office on a consistent basis.
I get it.
The implicit, the seminar that we did was done by them, was well done. I think everybody enjoyed that. He's got a lot of statistics from that office and a lot of best practices. So you all will have a fulsome conversation. I'm going to move now on to public finance. Portia, can you give a summary where we're on public finance this month?
Thank you very much. Just a brief market update. Total new issue supply is currently about $59.6 billion year to date. That's down about 20.5% compared to this time last year. This week's total supply is expected to be about $8 billion. Tax exempt bond yields were flat yesterday, Tuesday. The 10-year AAA MMD remained at a 1.15%, while the 30-year remained at a 1.8%. US government bond yields decreased, with the 10-year Treasury decreasing by 3 basis points and the 30-year Treasury decreasing by 2 basis points to 1.42% and 2.21% respectively. Municipal bond funds reported modest inflows for the week ending February 24th. The market saw some pretty big adjustments last week. And since the February board meeting, the 1-year MMD rate increased 3 basis points, and the 10 and 30-year have both increased by 42 basis points. Similarly, the 10 and 30-year Treasury since the February board meeting have increased by 30 and 34 basis points respectively. Also included in the board materials are a package of 3 bond sale summaries, which include performance metrics. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Portia. Any questions on public finance? We do have some interesting, exciting transactions coming up in public finance. You heard about a lot of them today. So that group has been very, very busy. One of the things I'm always reluctant to do is call out someone specifically, because then you end up not calling out everybody who's contributed. But in part of answering John Johnson's question and reflecting on it this morning, Steve Curl really deserves a little more call out, because he's had so many of his folks who have been physically engaged in getting out of the marketplace logistically during this COVID period of time. They're the ones that really have been our front line during this. A lot of us have been behind the screen safely. He individually has done a lot of work going to sites and those things. I just want to shout out that Steve has done a wonderful job of keeping his team safe, engaged, coordinated, moved from here to there, dealing with the various issues and starts and stops and all of that. So I just want to say for the board, again, everyone at DASNY, all 470 some of us have done great work, but Steve certainly deserves a specific shout out for the work he did, given the logistics he had to deal with over this past year. And so with that, Steve, give me a great construction report. So it sounds like that you've done all that I said you did.
Oh boy. Talk about pressure. Thank you, Ruben. Really, it's the guys on the front lines. They're the bread and butter. That's where the rubber meets the road. I just pop around and say hello to them every now and then. As far as the past month, just what we're really focused on today is the Javits Center, our code compliance group. Fresh off of the work they did down at Moynihan Station, has now been pulled heavily into the Javits expansion project. We're fully engaged. We're doing a number of reviews and inspections on a weekly basis. We do have consultants down there as well helping us, but really the exact same team that brought Moynihan to life is now down the street a bit, working at the Javits Center. The TAO, that's the temporary approval for occupancy date, has been targeted for May 3rd. We certainly have a lot of work to do down there to get to that milestone, but we are fully engaged. Speaking of Moynihan Station, we are now working on phase 3 of that project. Facebook is taken over the balance of that facility. One gigantic tenant that DASNY is permitting that fit out space for. So the same code folks who have been working with both Moynihan and Javits, Moynihan Phase 2, are also working on the Phase 3 piece there for Facebook. Of note, we at FIT, just down from our One Penn former offices, EE Cruz, our Package 1 foundation contractor, has mobilized to the site. 28th Street traffic barricades and traffic control is now in place, which really tells us that the project is taking shape and is ready to move deeply into the construction phase. On the pre-construction side of that project, activities continue, including subcontractor buyout for both Package 1 and Package 2. A lot of submittal work has been processed, and certainly the site work prep is ongoing. We, DASNY, have moved our project manager, Paul Conclavis, into Feldman Hall. Those will be our offices, along with EE Cruz and our construction manager, the Legacy Group. This project is a 32-month project that is just now getting started. Up at Lehman College, another large project, $90 million School of Nursing project is about to break ground. We just completed demolition of a bookstore on the campus to make way for the nursing project. Sinalta Construction is the general contractor for the project, and Chris West is DASNY's project manager. We do have a CM on board up there, it's TDX, and that project is a 32-month project. Just a couple of OMH highlights. We do have 4 major projects with OMH that are either concluding or in some stage of either design or construction. At South Beach, you've heard me talk about that many times. Northwell continues to occupy the South Beach Psych Center, which was converted into a COVID-19 hospital last March, actually, 1 year ago. DASNY and OMH now are beginning plans for OMH to formally occupy the facility upon Northwell's exit, and we're hearing that that may happen within the next couple of months. In Central New York, at the Central New York Psychiatric Center, Phase 1 of a $130 million renovation project is getting prepped for advertisement for bid. This is a very long-term, multi-phase project, given the fact that all the work will take place in an occupied facility. Most of the work centers around Building 39's MEP systems, as well as a complete window replacement for that facility. Nick Hustis is DASNY's project manager for Central New York. Out in Western New York, the Western New York Children's Psych Center, that project is concluding from a design perspective. We anticipate advertising for bid within the next couple of months. Michelle Paris is our project manager there. And our largest project that we're actively engaged in is the Mid-Hudson Forensic Psychiatric Center. This is a complete new build of a campus down in Mid-Hudson. We're advancing from concept to schematic design. STV and AR are our project designers, and that project's being managed by Sam Gleason. Just a couple of other quick items with regard to the construction division. Ruben mentioned PM Web. We are continuing the implementation there. Our IS folks have taken over a brunt of the configuration of the functionality for that system. We did push our anticipated live processing date from the beginning of April to late July of this year. Most of that has to do with our folks doing the configuration rather than a third-party consultant. A bit of a learning curve, as well as a learning curve for us and the durations, really the amount of time it takes to configure that system. We have had 4 construction division staff announce retirements since January 1. We are working to fill those gaps and remain responsive to our customer agencies in the meantime. And just lastly, a quick note about West Point. I've mentioned it before. We've been asked to engage in a 5th project down there recently at the Academy. This is the relocation of some bookstore space. We continue to work on contracting language. We actually have a meeting with them today associated with construction services for the Academy. With that, Ruben and Al, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Steve. Any questions for Steve?
Well, not a question so much, Mr. President, as a comment, and Steve already knows about this, so do you. I am really keen on having as many members of this board together visit Moynihan Station as soon as that's, to use Sarah's word, practicable. I like that word. It is grand space, as I've already said to Steve. It's an extraordinary, it was and continues to be an extraordinary project. I know ours was a permitting function there, but I'll be honest with everybody on the call. I take full credit for DASNY. With everybody I talk to, DASNY's importance to the completion of that project. It is nothing less than grand, and it is worth an hour of folks' time to get down there. We take the train whenever that's comfortable for everybody. So we don't have to be in a van together. We don't have to, if we're still wearing masks, Ruben, when you and Steve decide that makes sense, then that'll be fine as well. But I would love for this board, as many members as possible, to get down there. And Steve, it's a great piece of work. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, we'll definitely do that. And we'll make sure that one of our folks who's on site on a consistent basis is there to join us so they can give us the the behind the scenes tour. One of the things about permitting, and we should take full credit for it, is when it comes to Moynihan Station and other big projects, the health and safety issues are kind of an afterthought. And the work that we do there on the permitting side and also on consulting on how to solve problems and work through that is just very, very important to the work. So great job there, and great. Thank you for highlighting that, Mr. Chairman. We're now going to move on to budget. As you know, you received the proposed budget. We also posted it on the Public Authorities Reporting Information Systems, and Deb Fasher will be sharing her screen. If you're in gallery mode, it will look better.
This really is an amazing device, isn't it? I mean, you can, it's just as many pictures on the screen as you want. That's terrific. Thank you.
So I'm going to have Ms. Ellis do her presentation, and then I will fill in any gaps that I feel like we need to fill in after. Kim, you're on mute.
Okay, thank you, Ruben. Sorry. Yes, I put together a few slides just to kind of walk us through an overview of the budget for this year. And Deb, I believe I have control of the screen. Here we go. Okay, just a few highlights. Starting with this page, I just wanted to provide a brief snapshot of the timeline in the budget development process. On December 30th, budget materials were sent to the board, and in accordance with the Public Authorities Accountability Acts of 2005 and 2009, they were posted on DASNY's website and on the Public Authorities Reporting Information System. Today, I'm going to provide a high-level overview of that budget. And lastly, on March 31st, the board will consider a resolution to adopt the budget at the meeting. The budget package you previously received reflects operating expenditures of $114 million, which is a 3% decrease over the adopted 2021 budget. When pulling out pass-through expenses, the internal operating budget reflects expenditures of approximately $85 million, which is a 5.2% decrease over the current year adopted budget. The primary drivers for the decrease in operating expenditures are related to salaries and M&O expenses. Salaries are proposed to decrease by approximately $3.8 million. This decrease reflects an FTE level of 473, which is a reduction of 15 from the current year projected and below the 515 in the current year's adopted budget. Salaries do include the contractual obligations for step and longevity increases of represented employees. A cost of living adjustment or COLA is not included as the collective bargaining agreement ends on March 31st of this year. Benefits are proposed to increase approximately $500,000. This reflects a 3% increase in health insurance premiums due to higher rates and higher contributions for retirements based on the estimate received from the retirement system. M&O expenses reflect a 13.4% reduction, primarily related to discretionary line items such as travel, training, and consulting services. And pass-through expenses reflect a 23% increase in insurance. The impact.
Slides so sensitive.
Yeah, very sensitive. Sorry, apologies. The impact of the proposed operating budget on DASNY's financial position is based on a few key assumptions underlying the proposed budget. In line with what has been done in the past, this initial budget was prepared without insight into the state's budget. However, with the expectation that this would be a difficult budget year, we shifted some of our assumptions regarding the level of support we expect to receive. We have since reviewed the proposed executive budget and have not seen anything that will warrant making adjustments to what we initially proposed or to any assumptions made in its development. As I said, the proposed budget reflects an FTE level that's 15 FTEs below the level projected for the current year and 34 below the approved level in the 2021 budget. Additionally, DASNY can assume the same level of support as in the past from our public clients due to the financial position of the state. As such, we've assumed a 15% reduction in revenue for CUNY, which is in line with what we've seen in the executive budget, and a 50% reduction in revenue for the SUNY dorm program, which reflects the expectation of not having a robust SUNY summer program since we had no projects in design over the fall. Other public revenue is expected to be break even with slight increases in operating expenses from current year levels and changes to the OPEB adjustment in the other expense line item. Taking into account these assumptions, the 2021-22 operating results are expected to result in a deficit of approximately $4.8 million for the year. This has been a difficult budget year. However, some good news looking to next year is that we have started to see clients get approvals to advance projects in their pipeline. We've heard both CUNY and OPWDE have received approvals to advance projects. We have new projects with West Point. And additionally, the state budget includes legislation that could expand DASNY's authority to finance and manage construction for not-for-profit entities. If approved, any additional revenue as a result of the expanded authorization would work to reduce the deficit. Next steps are at the March 31st meeting. Members will be asked to consider a resolution to adopt the 21-22 operating budget. Although not anticipated, should there be any changes to what you've been provided and what's been presented today, you will be given those updates ahead of the meeting and prior to being asked to take action. Any questions?
None here, Kim. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. That's very helpful. I just want to make a couple of quick comments. Certainly with the pending passage of the federal relief bill, I think the state overall will be in a little better position than we anticipated going forward. There's certainly some money in there for state and local, as well as money for schools and universities and such. Having said that, we are very concerned about the next 12 to 18 months because, as Steve always tells me, it wasn't designed this year, it won't be built next year. And so our design has been behind from that perspective. So we're concerned about that. We are trying to pick up as many additional items of work as we can. We're also, as we mentioned, we have several retirements, some of them even key retirements. We're not replacing those folks. We're moving people around the best we can to fill those gaps without causing us to have undue budget issues. So I feel like from our perspective, the news probably will not get worse anytime soon, but kind of at a trough, working our way back up, and it will be a grind over the next 12 to 18 months to get there. Jeff, don't call me Dr. No Arnold, has done a great job. I can't commend him enough on really overseeing expenditures and just being as tight as possible without inhibiting us from doing anything that would cause harm to our clients, of course. but have really been on top of that, and that has been helpful. He briefs me and Paul and Caroline, probably once a quarter on kind of where things are from a budget perspective. But he's been very good about highlighting things that are necessary. Kim and her group have really been trying to streamline processes for us all so we can get things done more efficiently. So in a very difficult budget year, the organization has stepped up. And our hope is that over the next 25 days or so, the state budget will not have any negative impact on DASNY beyond where we already see it now. We certainly don't foresee that at this point. With that, Mr. Chairman, that's our budget presentation.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much.
And it also concludes my president's report. I know that this is longer than normal, but
I was just going to say, I don't think your president's report includes anything else. And we have covered the material at tabs 13, 12, and 11. Kimberly, I assume that that you have a written report here. I don't know whether you choose to expand on it, but I assume that your budget presentation is the expansion of
the financial report.
Okay, terrific.
Yes, that's correct. And also in your packet is the quarterly treasurer's report, investment report that we're required to provide to the board on a quarterly basis if there's any questions on that.
And we will not hesitate to raise them with you. I will remind the board that we have two additional formal matters to deal with at the end of this meeting. But before we do that, we have agreed to save the governance off-record discussion for the end of this meeting. We are at that point now, unless there are any other matters to come before the board that are non-governance related. Thank
Mr.
you
Chairman,
all.
we do not have any more matters. I just want to let the DASNY staff, other than myself, Ms. Richards, and Ms. Fasser, you all can go about your day. When this board comes back, we will just adjourn the meeting, but we'll be here, Mr. Chairman, and I think Deb Fasser will be moving you all to your breakout room for your executive session, and John Gardner will be moving you back.
Thank you. Is there anything that we need to have staff around for, Ruben, for the two subsidiary meetings? I don't think so, but other than Sarah, of course, and Deborah.
Those subsidiary meetings, Mr. Chairman, are at the May 5th meeting. Yesterday was the governance committee meeting for those subsidiaries, but the full board meeting for the subsidiaries is at the May 5th meeting.
Yeah, and you said that to us yesterday, and I completely forgot it. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you very much. Then there being no further business other than the governance committee meeting executive session, may I have a motion to go into the executive session to discuss financial and credit history of particular corporations, proposed pending or current litigation, and the employment histories of particular persons or matters leading to the appointment, employment, promotion, demotion, discipline, suspension, dismissal, or removal of particular persons. May I have a motion?
Also move.
Thank you very much, Beryl. Is there a second?
Seconded.
Wellington, thank you very much. Are there objections to the executive session? Are there abstentions from the vote? Hearing none, we are in executive session. Okay, so the record will reflect that we've just left an executive session during which no decisions were made other than to return to the open session. There being no further business to come before this board, may I have a motion, please, to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Thank you, Wellington. Is there a second?
Beryl has seconded it. She's muted, but I can read her lips. So it has been seconded.
All right, I'll second it.
Okay.
If you need a voice.
I have a comment to make.
The leave button.
I have a comment to make after the meeting is adjourned. If you'd stay on for 10 seconds, I'd be very grateful. May I have, I'm sorry, I've asked for the motion. It's been seconded. Are there any objections to adjourning the meeting? There being none, does anybody abstain from the vote to adjourn the meeting? Hearing none, the meeting is adjourned.